I'm Cassandra Mitchell, 28, celebrating our one-year anniversary at Ozul, the restaurant where Ethan first told me he loved me. For 6 months, I'd secretly studied Spanish to surprise my half-Colombian boyfriend tonight. As we clinked glasses, Ethan turned to his friend Marco and switched to Spanish, assuming I wouldn't understand. "She looks good tonight, but this dress is too tight for her body type," he smirked in perfect Spanish. I maintained my smile while my stomach dropped. Should I reveal I understood every cruel word or wait? The betrayal cut deeper with each syllable. Before I continue the story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever caught someone talking behind your back. Ethan and I met 14 months ago during one of Seattle's infamous downpours. I ducked into a coffee shop, drenched and irritated, when a deep voice asked if I wanted to borrow a towel. Looking up, I saw Ethan Williams standing there, handsome with his dark curly hair and amber eyes, holding out a small gym towel from his bag. It was such a simple gesture, but the thoughtfulness caught me off guard. "I always carry one for emergencies," he explained with a charming smile. Seattle weather demands preparation. That smile was disarming. We ended up sharing a table as the cafe filled with other rain refugees. 3 hours of conversation felt like minutes. Ethan was confident, articulate, and seemed genuinely interested in my life. As a marketing specialist at a mid-sized tech company, I wasn't used to men asking thoughtful questions about my career ambitions. Ethan had moved to Seattle 5 years earlier and established himself as a successful real estate agent. He specialized in luxury properties and exuded the polished confidence of someone accustomed to closing big deals. His Colombian mother and American father had raised him in Florida before he ventured west for college and stayed. "My mother made sure I grew up bilingual," he'd told me on our third date. "Speaking Spanish connects me to half my identity." I remembered how his eyes lit up when discussing his heritage, switching effortlessly between English and beautiful, rolling Spanish when describing his grandmother's cooking. I'd smiled and nodded, understanding nothing but enchanted by the musical quality of his words. From the beginning, our relationship had a particular dynamic. Ethan was used to taking charge, making decisions, and offering guidance. I found myself naturally accommodating, grateful for his worldliness. He chose the restaurants, suggested weekend activities, and gently corrected my wine selections. I didn't mind. After a string of relationships with directionless men, Ethan's confidence was refreshing. But underneath my accommodation lurked insecurity. Ethan's world was filled with successful professionals, gallery openings, and charity galas. My college education from a state school sometimes felt inadequate among his friends with prestigious degrees. I constantly worried about saying the wrong thing, wearing the inappropriate outfit, or somehow revealing I didn't belong in his sophisticated circle. "You're doing fine," he'd reassure me after social gatherings, in a tone that suggested I'd passed a test rather than enjoyed myself. 3 months into dating Ethan, I met his mother during her visit to Seattle. Sophia Williams was elegant, intelligent, and intimidating. She spoke primarily Spanish to Ethan during dinner, occasionally translating for me with a tight smile. I felt like an outsider watching their animated conversation, catching Ethan's apologetic glances between responses. That night, I made a decision. If Spanish was important to Ethan, I would learn. Not just tourist phrases, but real conversational ability. I found Alicia, a Spanish tutor, through a colleague and arranged private lessons 3 times weekly. I practiced during lunch breaks, listened to Spanish podcasts while commuting, and watched Spanish television with subtitles at night when Ethan wasn't staying over. Late meetings, I'd explain when canceling our weeknight plans. Big project deadline, I'd text when declining weekend brunches. The secrecy was exhausting but necessary for my surprise. Alicia proved an encouraging teacher, praising my dedication despite my struggles with pronunciation and subjunctive tenses. "Your boyfriend will be so impressed," she assured me during particularly frustrating sessions. "This is a beautiful gift you're giving him." Throughout our relationship, Ethan often spoke Spanish with his family during calls, but never suggested teaching me. When I once expressed interest in learning basic phrases, he'd patted my hand and said, "It's a challenging language, babe. Maybe start with Duolingo for fun." His dismissive tone stung, fueling my determination to master Spanish in secret. As our one-year anniversary approached, Ethan suggested celebrating at Azul, the upscale restaurant where he'd first said, "I love you" 6 months into our relationship. The reservation excited me not just for the romantic significance, but as the perfect setting to reveal my Spanish proficiency. I imagined his delighted surprise, perhaps tears of appreciation and deepened connection as I unlocked this part of his world. The night before our anniversary, I rehearsed my prepared speech with Alicia over video call. Tu idioma es hermoso como tú. He estado aprendiendo para compartir esta parte de ti. Your language is beautiful like you. I've been learning to share this part of you. Perfect, Cassie, Alicia beamed. Your accent is natural and the sentiment is lovely. He'll be so touched. I fell asleep imagining Ethan's face lighting up with pride and affection, never suspecting how differently our anniversary night would unfold. I spent 3 hours preparing for our anniversary dinner. My navy blue dress, purchased specifically for the occasion, hugged my curves before flowing elegantly to my knees. I styled my auburn hair in loose waves, applied makeup that enhanced without overwhelming, and selected delicate silver jewelry that caught the light with each movement. The reflection staring back from my full-length mirror looked polished, sophisticated, worthy of standing beside Ethan. "Perfect," I whispered, rehearsing my Spanish reveal one final time before slipping on heels and grabbing my clutch. Ethan texted that he'd meet me at the restaurant. "Another late showing for a potential client," he explained. I tamped down disappointment that we wouldn't arrive together and hailed a rideshare to Azul. The restaurant occupied the 32nd floor of a downtown high-rise, offering panoramic views of Elliott Bay and the Olympic Mountains beyond. Floor-to-ceiling windows captured the sunset's pink-orange glow, while modern chandeliers cast intimate lighting over white-clothed tables. A hostess in a sleek black dress checked my reservation. "Right this way, Ms. Mitchell. Mr. Williams is already seated." My heart fluttered with anticipation as I followed her through the dining room, mentally practicing my Spanish opener. But as we approached the table, confusion replaced excitement. Ethan wasn't alone. 4 additional people surrounded him, champagne glasses already raised in a toast. I recognized Marco Rodriguez, Ethan's college friend and business associate, sitting beside his girlfriend Tara. Across from them sat Jason Chan and his new girlfriend Kelsey, whom I'd met only once at a holiday party. "There she is." Ethan stood, looking handsome in his tailored gray suit. He kissed my cheek and pulled out my chair. "Hope you don't mind the company." Marco called about celebrating their new condo purchase, and it seemed perfect to combine celebrations. I forced a smile while disappointment crashed through me. Our intimate anniversary dinner had transformed into a group social event without consultation. The Spanish reveal I'd planned now seemed impossible in this setting. "Of course not," I lied smoothly. "Congratulations on the condo, Marco and Tara." "Thanks, Cassie," Marco replied with genuine warmth. Unlike some of Ethan's friends, Marco always made effort to include me in conversations. "Sorry to crash your anniversary." Ethan assured us you wouldn't mind. "It's wonderful to share celebrations," I said, settling into my seat while calculating how to salvage the evening. A server appeared immediately, filling my champagne glass with Dom Perignon. Compliments of Mr. Williams, who arranged this special reserve for the table. Ethan beamed, clearly pleased with himself. "Only the best tonight." The champagne's crisp bubbles didn't quite wash away my disappointment, but I appreciated the gesture. Perhaps we could still have our moment later in the evening. Ethan appeared attentive during the appetizer course, asking about my day and keeping his hand on my knee beneath the table. He'd ordered the seafood tower before my arrival, another decision made without me, but selected my favorite oysters among the assortment. "Happy anniversary, babe," he murmured, clinking his glass against mine while the others chatted about real estate trends. His amber eyes held genuine affection, temporarily dissolving my frustration. As our entrees arrived, perfectly seared scallops for me, Wagyu steak for Ethan. The dynamics shifted. Ethan drank more rapidly, ordering an expensive Cabernet after finishing his champagne. His attention drifted increasingly toward Marco and Jason's conversation about a potential development property. His hand disappeared from my knee as he gesticulated about market valuations and investment potential. I turned to Tara, attempting friendly conversation about her interior design business, but noticed her frequent glances toward her phone. Kelsey contributed occasional comments about her work in pharmaceutical sales, but seemed equally peripheral to the men's increasingly animated discussion. "This always happens," Tara whispered with a knowing smile. "The boys get talking business and forget we exist." I nodded, uncomfortable with both her observation and my acceptance of it. Was this pattern so established that Ethan's friends' girlfriends expected marginalization? More troubling was my own resignation. When had I become someone who smiled politely while being sidelined? 40 minutes into dinner, Ethan's phone buzzed. He checked the screen and stood abruptly. "Need to take this." Potential client with a waterfront listing. He strode toward the restaurant entrance, leaving me mid-sentence about a work project I'd been describing. I watched him go, noticing how he paused to charm the hostess before disappearing into the hallway. "Another drink while we wait?" Jason offered, signaling the server. I declined politely, sipping water instead. The conversation fractured into smaller exchanges as we awaited Ethan's return. Marco discussed vacation plans with Tara while Jason and Kelsey debated the merits of different Seattle neighborhoods. I contributed occasionally, but felt increasingly like an ornament rather than a participant. 15 minutes stretched to 25 before Ethan reappeared, sliding into his seat without apology for his extended absence. His cheeks looked flushed, whether from alcohol or excitement unclear. "Sorry about that," he said to the table generally, not specifically to me. "Potential oceanfront property. Could be my biggest commission this year." "Congratulations," I offered, trying to recapture our anniversary spirit. "That's exciting." Ethan nodded distractedly, turning immediately to Marco. They exchanged significant glances before leaning closer together. I noticed Marco's eyes flick toward me briefly before he whispered something to Ethan. Both men glanced my way, then quickly looked elsewhere when they caught my gaze. Something cold settled in my stomach, a premonition that the evening was about to take an unexpected turn. I straightened my posture and sipped my water, mentally reviewing my Spanish vocabulary. Whatever happened next, I was more prepared than anyone at the table realized. As dessert menus arrived, Ethan's posture changed. He leaned toward Marco, lowering his voice. Then came the switch, the subtle shift in his throat and tongue as English gave way to Spanish. After months of intensive study, the transition was unmistakable to my ears. "Esta noche es interminable," Ethan said, rolling his eyes slightly. "Casi está siendo tan necesitada. Siempre tengo que prestar attention." Tonight is endless. Cassie is being so needy. I always have to pay attention to her. My fingers froze around my water glass, heart suddenly pounding. I maintained my pleasant expression with effort, pretending to study the dessert options while my boyfriend continued in what he believed was a private code. Marco glanced uncomfortably in my direction before responding quietly, "No seas duro con ella. Es tu aniversario. Don't be harsh with her. It's your anniversary." Ethan snorted softly. "Un ano es sufficient. Ese vestido es demasiado ajustado para su tipo de cuerpo, no crees? Está tratando demasiado. 1 year is enough. That dress is too tight for her body type, don't you think? She's trying too hard." The words sliced through me like physical wounds. I felt blood rushing to my face but forced myself to appear calm, taking a deliberate sip of water while screaming internally. 6 months of dedicated Spanish study had prepared me for a romantic surprise, not this gut-wrenching betrayal. "No diría eso," Marco muttered, clearly uncomfortable. "Se ve bien." I wouldn't say that. She looks good. "Deberías ver a la chica que me mostró una casa la semana pasada," Ethan continued, ignoring Marco's reluctance. "Una verdadera belleza colombiana. Pelo largo y negro, curvas perfectas. No como las chicas americanas que solo comen ensaladas y siguen pareciendo gordas. You should see the girl who showed me a house last week. A true Colombian beauty. Long black hair, perfect curves. Not like American girls who just eat salads and still look fat. My hand trembled slightly, but I steadied it by placing my palm flat against the table. The Spanish phrases I'd so carefully practiced now served a different purpose, allowing me to understand each cutting insult. My anniversary gift had become a window into Ethan's true character. Habla español también. No tendría que explicar mi cultura como lo hago con casi. Tan básica, con su trabajo de marketing aburrido. She speaks Spanish too. I wouldn't have to explain my culture like I do with Cassie. So basic, with her boring marketing job. Marco shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting between Ethan and me. Creo que deberías parar, amigo. Estás siendo injusto. I think you should stop, friend. You're being unfair. Sabes que. Ethan leaned closer to Marco, voice slightly slurred from the multiple drinks. Estoy planeando terminar con ella después de nuestras vacaciones el próximo mes. Ya reserve una habitación separada en el hotel. Un último fin de semana antes de acabar con esto. You know what? I'm planning to break up with her after our vacation next month. I already booked a separate room at the hotel. One last weekend before ending this. Heat flooded my body, followed by a wave of cold numbness. The restaurant sounds receded as I processed what I'd heard. Ethan wasn't just mocking my appearance or belittling my career. He was planning our breakup while simultaneously planning a vacation under false pretenses. I flashed back to earlier that week when I'd taken a half-day off work to find the perfect anniversary gift for Ethan. I'd selected a vintage watch I couldn't really afford, justified by my belief in our future together. The wrapped package sat in my purse now, suddenly absurd. While maintaining my neutral expression, memories cascaded through my mind, canceling plans with friends to accommodate Ethan's schedule, spending hours preparing meals he often criticized as too bland, listening attentively to his work stories while he frequently interrupted mine. I'd interpreted these as minor relationship compromises, not warning signs of fundamental disrespect. ¿Why sabes que más? Ethan continued, apparently enjoying his secret conversation. Su familia es tan aburrida. Su padre es mecánico y su madre es maestra de escuela. Tan común. Mi madre tenía razón sobre ella. And you know what else? Her family is so boring. Her father is a mechanic and her mother is a schoolteacher. So common. My mother was right about her. The insult to my family, my kind, hard-working parents who had welcomed Ethan warmly into their modest home, ignited something beyond hurt. Anger began replacing shock, strengthening rather than weakening me. Every Spanish syllable now revealed the true Ethan, dissolving the idealized version I'd constructed. ¿Que hay de la rubia en la mesa junto a la ventana? Ethan nodded subtly toward a woman dining nearby. Eso es más mi tipo. Apuesto a que ella no habla de estrategias de marketing durante la cena. What about the blonde at the table by the window? That's more my type. I bet she doesn't talk about marketing strategies during dinner. Marco frowned, no longer making eye contact with Ethan. Estás borracho, hombre. Deberías parar. You're drunk, man. You should stop. Physical sensations intensified as my shock evolved into clarity. My heart raced uncomfortably, hands trembled beneath the table, and my face felt flushed despite my efforts to appear normal. Jason and Kelsey continued their separate conversation, oblivious to the Spanish character assassination occurring beside them. Tara scrolled through her phone, perhaps accustomed to being excluded from Marco and Ethan's Spanish exchanges. I thought about the vacation Ethan had proposed last week, a long weekend at a beachfront resort in San Diego. I'd arranged time off work, bought a new swimsuit, and researched local attractions. Now I understood it was planned as our final trip, with Ethan securing separate accommodations for what would become our separation. Ella and I siquiera sospecha. Ethan chuckled softly. Tan confiada. Tan facil de engañar. She doesn't even suspect. So trusting. So easy to fool. Something shifted inside me at those words. The hurt transformed into cold, clear purpose. As Ethan continued his Spanish diatribe, unaware that every word revealed his true character, I made my decision. This anniversary would indeed mark a significant milestone in our relationship, just not the one either of us had anticipated. While Ethan continued his Spanish commentary, oblivious to my comprehension, my mind raced through a battlefield of emotions. The elegant restaurant suddenly felt suffocating, crystal glasses and silver flatware blurring as I processed what was happening. I maintained my pleasant expression through sheer force of will, even managing an occasional nod toward Kelsey's story about a difficult client. Behind my composed facade, memories surfaced with new clarity, warning signs I'd rationalized away throughout our relationship. The time Ethan corrected my table manners at dinner with his colleagues, tapping my elbow to lower it from the table while giving me a look of gentle admonishment. How he frequently reworked my outfit choices before social events, suggesting alternatives that were more appropriate for the occasion. Es como tener que entrenar a un cachorro, Ethan was saying to Marco. It's like having to train a puppy. I recalled the night I'd proudly shared news about my promotion at work. Ethan had smiled, kissed my forehead, and said, "That's great, babe. Small steps." At the time, I'd accepted his diminishment of my achievement, even feeling grateful for his grounding perspective. Now, the memory burned with humiliation. Physical discomfort intensified as I sat through this Spanish dissection of my inadequacies. My chest felt tight, breathing shallow. The beautiful anniversary dress I'd carefully selected now felt like a costume, one Ethan had just mockingly critiqued. My hand trembled slightly as I reached for my water glass, forcing myself to take small sips rather than the gulping my dry throat craved. Should I confront him immediately? Create a scene in this upscale restaurant? The vindictive part of me wanted to stand up, throw my napkin down, and expose him publicly. I imagined the satisfaction of watching shock replace his smug expression as I responded to his insults in perfect Spanish. But something deeper held me back. The strategic part of my brain, the part that had methodically learned Spanish over 6 months, counseled patience. A public confrontation might be temporarily satisfying, but ultimately shallow. Ethan would likely twist the narrative, painting me as overreacting or misunderstanding his jokes. Mira como sonríe, sin entender nada, Ethan said to Marco. Look how she smiles, understanding nothing. If only he knew. Each Spanish syllable now revealed more about Ethan than he realized, exposing layers of disrespect beyond the immediate insults. This wasn't just about tonight's mockery, it was about a fundamental pattern of belittlement I'd been too enamored to recognize. I remembered our third date, when Ethan had taken my phone to fix my settings without asking permission. At the time, I'd found it helpful rather than intrusive. Then there was his habit of ordering my meals without consultation, always with a charming, "Trust me, you'll love this." His constant texts checking my whereabouts when we weren't together. The subtle ways he'd isolated me from friends whose influence he deemed negative. What I'd interpreted as protective behavior now revealed itself as controlling. What I'd accepted as sophistication now appeared as elitism. The charming confidence that had attracted me masked a profound insecurity that required constant validation through dominance. As my anger crystallized into clarity, I noticed other dynamics around the table. Marco's growing discomfort with Ethan's comments. Tara's detached resignation. The practiced way Jason and Kelsey maintained separate conversation, suggesting this pattern of exclusion was familiar. Después de un año, el sexo se vuelve aburrido de todos modos, Ethan said with a dismissive hand gesture. After a year, the sex becomes boring anyway. Heat flooded my face at this intimate betrayal. Marco finally looked genuinely uncomfortable, avoiding eye contact with both Ethan and me. I took a deep breath, feeling a strange calm replacing my initial shock. The decision forming in my mind wasn't just about tonight's humiliation, but about reclaiming my dignity from a relationship built on unequal footing. The server approached, asking about dessert orders. I smiled politely, requesting a few minutes more to decide. The brief interruption gave me space to finalize my strategy. I wouldn't create a scene that Ethan could later reframe as emotional instability. Instead, I would respond with the same calculated precision I'd applied to learning Spanish. Creo que esta molesta porque he estado en mi teléfono, Ethan said with a chuckle. I think she's upset because I've been on my phone. No es muy brillante, he added unnecessarily. Bonita, pero no brillante. Not very bright. Pretty, but not bright. That final insult solidified my resolve. For a year, I'd accommodated Ethan's preferences, adjusted my behavior to meet his expectations, and worked to fit into his world. I'd even learned Spanish to connect with his heritage. Meanwhile, he'd been calculating my expiration date, planning our separation while exploiting my trust. I excused myself to the restroom, needing a moment alone to prepare for what would come next. As I walked away, I heard Ethan switch to English, likely making some excuse for my departure. The knowledge that I understood everything, that his private commentary was completely transparent to me, provided the first genuine satisfaction of the evening. In the elegant bathroom, I stared at my reflection under flattering lighting designed to make restaurant patrons feel beautiful. My makeup remained perfect, hair still elegantly styled. Externally, I looked like the sophisticated girlfriend Ethan had molded me to be. Internally, I was transforming into someone stronger, someone unwilling to accept disrespect disguised as guidance. You've got this, Cassie, I whispered to my reflection. 6 months of Spanish lessons are about to pay off in a way neither of you expected. I reapplied my lipstick, straightened my shoulders, and practiced the calm, slightly amused expression I would maintain throughout what came next. This anniversary would indeed mark a significant milestone, just not the one I'd planned. As I walked back toward the table, I felt lighter with each step. By the time I reached my chair, I had transformed from victim to strategist, ready to reclaim the narrative Ethan thought he controlled. I returned to the table with renewed purpose, sliding gracefully into my seat. Ethan barely acknowledged my return, deep in Spanish conversation with Marco about a potential real estate development. I noticed Marco's obvious discomfort, his eyes darting toward me apologetically. Would anyone like to share a dessert? I asked the table in English, my voice steady and pleasant. The chocolate soufflé here is spectacular. Sure, we can share one, Ethan replied dismissively before turning back to Marco. Como estaba diciendo sobre esa propiedad? As I was saying about that property. I waited for a natural pause in conversation, then casually addressed our server who had approached for dessert orders. Me gustaría el soufflé de chocolate, por favor. Y tal vez un café con leche para acompañarlo. I'd like the chocolate soufflé, please. And perhaps a latte to accompany it. My Spanish pronunciation was flawless, my tone casual as though speaking Spanish was the most natural thing in the world. The table fell silent. From my peripheral vision, I saw Ethan freeze mid-gesture, his glass of bourbon suspended halfway to his lips. Claro, señorita. Excellent election, the server responded with a smile. Of course, miss. Excellent choice. I turned to Tara, maintaining my composure. ¿Te gustaría compartir el postre conmigo? Es bastante grande. Would you like to share the dessert with me? It's quite large. Tara's eyes widened in surprise. I don't speak Spanish, she stammered, looking between me and Marco in confusion. Oh, I'm sorry, I replied with a gentle smile. I just assumed since Spanish is spoken so freely at this table, everyone must understand it. The implication hung in the air. Ethan's face drained of color as understanding dawned. He placed his bourbon on the table with a heavy thud, some of the amber liquid sloshing over the rim. Cassie, he began, voice strained. I didn't realize you hablas español? I interrupted, tilting my head innocently. Que sorpresa. Yo también. You speak Spanish? What a surprise. Me too. Marco suddenly became intensely interested in his napkin, avoiding eye contact with everyone. Jason and Kelsey exchanged confused glances, sensing the sudden tension without understanding its source. Since when do you speak Spanish? Ethan asked, attempting to sound casual while his eyes betrayed panic. Oh, for about 6 months now, I replied lightly. I've been taking intensive lessons. I wanted to surprise you for our anniversary. And I certainly got a surprise in return. I turned to Marco, switching to Spanish. Marco, ti gusto la part donde Ethan dijo que mi vestido es demasiado ajustado para mi tipo de cuerpo? O prefieres cuando menciono que está planeando terminar conmigo después de nuestras vacaciones. Marco, did you enjoy the part where Ethan said my dress is too tight for my body type? Or did you prefer when he mentioned he's planning to break up with me after our vacation? Marco's face flushed dark red. Casi lo siento. No estaba de acuerdo con lo que dijo. Cassie, I'm sorry. I didn't agree with what he said. What's happening? Kelsey asked, looking between us. What are you guys talking about? Oh, just reviewing some of the charming commentary Ethan has been sharing in Spanish, I explained calmly. He's been quite descriptive about my physical shortcomings, my boring career, and my common family background. Apparently, I'm pretty but not bright. And he's already booked separate rooms for our upcoming vacation, which was planned as our final trip before breaking up. Tara gasped softly. Jason shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The server, sensing the tension, quietly placed my latte on the table and retreated. Cassie, you're overreacting, Ethan attempted, his voice taking on the patronizing tone I now recognized as his default when challenged. It was just guy talk. Marco and I were joking around. Amigo, no me metas en esto, Marco muttered. Buddy, don't drag me into this. I took a deliberate sip of my latte, maintaining eye contact with Ethan over the rim of the cup. Which part was the joke? Comparing me unfavorably to other women? Mocking my family? Or planning our breakup while sitting across from me at our anniversary dinner? You're taking everything out of context, Ethan insisted, looking around the table for support and finding none. I've had a few drinks. I didn't mean any of it. Actually, alcohol doesn't create thoughts. It just removes the filter that prevents you from expressing them, I replied. Everything you said in Spanish revealed your genuine feelings. You just never expected me to understand them. I turned to address everyone at the table. I apologize for the awkward situation. This certainly isn't how I planned to spend our anniversary. Neither did I, Ethan muttered, attempting to regain control of the narrative. I wanted a nice dinner, not a dramatic scene. No hay drama aquí, I responded coolly. Solo claridad. No drama here. Just clarity. The dessert arrived, a beautiful chocolate soufflé with 2 spoons. I smiled at the server. Gracias, pero solo necesitar un tender. Ya no estoy compartiendo. Thank you, but I'll only need 1 fork. I'm no longer sharing. Ethan's attempts at damage control became increasingly desperate. Babe, let's talk about this privately. You're embarrassing yourself. The old Cassie might have acquiesced, might have followed him outside to hear explanations and justifications. The new Cassie, forged through 6 months of secret Spanish lessons and 1 evening of brutal truths, simply smiled. No estoy avergonzada en absoluto, I replied calmly. Pero tú deberías estarlo. I'm not embarrassed at all. But you should be. I turned to Marco, switching to English for the benefit of the others. Marco, I've always appreciated your kindness. I should note that while Ethan was disparaging me, you did attempt to defend me several times. That says something about your character. Marco nodded uncomfortably. I'm really sorry, Cassie. This isn't right. No, it isn't, I agreed, turning back to Ethan. Nuestra relación ha terminado. No hay discusión. Our relationship is over. No discussion. With those words, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The anxiety and hurt remained, but something new emerged alongside them, a sense of power reclaimed, of dignity restored. You can't be serious, Ethan sputtered, his confident facade crumbling. Over some joking comments? Those weren't jokes, I replied simply. They were revelations. I should thank you, actually. Without your Spanish mockery, I might have continued investing in someone who fundamentally disrespects me. I stood up, placing my napkin beside my barely touched soufflé. I'll be paying for my portion of the meal, I informed the table, removing my wallet from my purse and placing my credit card on the table. Consider it my final independent decision in this relationship. You're overreacting, Ethan insisted as I stood beside the table, credit card in hand. His voice had taken on the patronizing tone I now recognized as his go-to strategy when losing control of a situation. Everyone says things they don't mean sometimes. That's true, I acknowledged, my voice steady. But not everyone systematically insults their partner's appearance, intelligence, family, and career in a language they assume their partner doesn't understand. Our server approached, sensing the tension. I handed him my card. I'd like to pay for my portion, please. Just the scallops, sparkling water, and souffle. I've got the whole bill, Ethan countered, reaching for his wallet. Don't be ridiculous, Cassie. I insist, I replied firmly. Independence is apparently something I should have exercised more frequently in this relationship. Marco cleared his throat uncomfortably. Maybe we should give you two some privacy. That's not necessary, I said. I've heard everything I need to hear. And in perfect Spanish, no less. Several diners at nearby tables had begun glancing our way, their interest piqued by the obvious confrontation unfolding. I hadn't intended to create a public scene, but I refused to be silenced by fear of embarrassment. Let me make something absolutely clear, I continued, addressing Ethan directly. Tonight wasn't just about the Spanish insults. It was about recognizing a pattern that's existed throughout our relationship. I counted off points on my fingers. You consistently make decisions without consulting me. You regularly criticize aspects of my life while presenting it as helpful guidance. You've systematically isolated me from friends you deemed negative influences. And apparently, you've been planning our breakup while simultaneously planning a vacation together. That's not fair, Ethan protested, his confident demeanor cracking further. I've supported your career. I introduced you to my friends. I've been a good boyfriend. You've been a controlling boyfriend, I corrected. There's a difference between support and supervision. The server returned with my receipt. I signed it quickly, adding a generous tip despite the circumstances. As I tucked my copy into my wallet, I noticed Marco and Tara exchanging significant glances. You know what? I've seen this before, Tara said suddenly, addressing me. The Spanish comments, the criticism disguised as jokes. It's not the first time. Ethan shot her a warning look. This isn't your business, Tara. Actually, you made it her business when you dragged your friends to our anniversary dinner without consulting me, I pointed out. And then proceeded to mock me in front of them. Jason, who had remained silent throughout the confrontation, finally spoke. Not cool, man. Seriously, not cool. Oh, so you're taking her side? Ethan's voice rose slightly, drawing more attention from neighboring tables. Because she's creating a scene over some harmless comments? They weren't harmless, Marco said quietly. I should have said something earlier. Lo siento, Cassie. I nodded my appreciation to Marco. Thank you for acknowledging that. Turning back to Ethan, I continued with remarkable composure. This isn't just about tonight. It's about realizing I've been making excuses for your behavior for a year. I've been working so hard to fit into your world that I've neglected to notice you've made no effort to enter mine. That's not true, Ethan protested, but his argument sounded hollow even to his own ears, judging by his uncertain expression. When was the last time you asked about my family without making some snide remark about their simple lifestyle? When did you last show genuine interest in my work beyond asking if I got that promotion that would come with a raise? I kept my voice level, more sad than angry now. A relationship shouldn't require one person to constantly diminish themselves to make the other feel superior. A middle-aged couple at the next table nodded almost imperceptibly, the woman giving me a small, encouraging smile. I think we should talk about this privately, Ethan tried again, clearly uncomfortable with the public nature of our confrontation. There's nothing more to discuss, I replied with finality. I wish you well, Ethan, but I deserve better than what you've offered. I gathered my purse and the wrapped watch I'd planned to give him, which now seemed like an artifact from another lifetime. Without further comment, I turned and walked toward the exit, my stride purposeful despite the trembling in my knees. The cool evening air hit my face as I stepped outside, bringing both relief and reality. I had just ended my year-long relationship in spectacular fashion. The adrenaline that had carried me through the confrontation began to ebb, leaving space for the hurt to seep back in. Not hurt over losing Ethan, that already felt right, but hurt over having invested so much in someone who valued me so little. Instead of hailing a rideshare immediately, I decided to walk for a while. The Seattle skyline glittered against the night sky, streets still busy with weekend activity. I moved through crowds of people enjoying their Friday evening, anonymous in my elegant dress, carrying the weight of my new reality. My phone buzzed repeatedly in my purse. I finally checked it 6 blocks from the restaurant, unsurprised to find multiple texts from Ethan. "You're being childish. Come back so we can talk like adults. I'm sorry if I hurt your feelings. You're overreacting. This is why I can't talk to you about things. You get emotional. Fine. Be that way. I was going to break up with you anyway. I didn't mean any of that. Please call me." The progression from accusation to anger to pleading was so predictable it almost made me laugh. I silenced my phone and continued walking, eventually catching a rideshare back to my apartment. Once home, I kicked off my heels and stood in the center of my living room, suddenly seeing the space through new eyes. Evidence of Ethan permeated the apartment, his spare toiletries in the bathroom, several changes of clothes in my closet, the expensive coffee maker he'd insisted I needed. More subtle were the changes I'd made to accommodate his preferences, rearranging furniture for better flow, replacing my colorful throw pillows with his preferred neutral tones, storing away family photos he found cluttered. With methodical determination, I began collecting Ethan's possessions. I found a cardboard box in my storage closet and filled it with his items: clothes, toiletries, the spare key he rarely used, books he'd lent me but I'd never enjoyed. I worked with quiet efficiency, removing traces of him from my space, while mentally cataloging the ways I would reclaim it as fully mine. His barrage of texts continued, eventually shifting to calls that I declined. Around midnight, the tone of his messages changed again. "You're making a huge mistake. No one else will understand you like I do. You'll regret this when you calm down. Did you really waste 6 months learning Spanish just to spy on me? That's psychotic." That last message confirmed I'd made the right decision. His inability to recognize his own behavior as problematic while characterizing my language learning as deceptive revealed the fundamental disconnect in how we viewed respect in relationships. I blocked his number and his social media accounts, not out of spite but self-preservation. Whatever closure I needed wouldn't come from further interaction with Ethan. It would come from rebuilding the confidence I'd surrendered incrementally throughout our relationship. As I placed the box of his belongings by the door for eventual return, I found myself speaking aloud in Spanish, testing the freedom of using this skill for myself rather than for him. "Merezco más que esto. Merezco respeto y honestidad. I deserve more than this. I deserve respect and honesty." The words felt powerful in my mouth, a declaration of self-worth in the language that had revealed the truth about my relationship. 6 months of intensive study had given me an unexpected gift, not the connection to Ethan's world I'd sought, but the clarity to recognize I needed to leave it. 3 months after that fateful anniversary dinner, I found myself sitting in a sunny cafe, conversing easily in Spanish with my tutor Alicia. What had begun as language lessons had evolved into genuine friendship, with our weekly meetings now focusing as much on conversation as conjugation. "Tu español ha mejorado mucho," Alicia commented, stirring her cappuccino. "Your Spanish has improved so much." "Gracias. Es más fácil aprender cuando lo haces por ti misma y no por alguien más," I replied with a smile. "Thanks. It's easier to learn when you do it for yourself and not for someone else." The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd begun Spanish lessons to connect with Ethan, only to discover the language would instead free me from him. Now I continued studying for my own enrichment, finding unexpected joy in the melodic sounds and expressive phrases that were becoming increasingly natural to me. My apartment had transformed alongside my perspective. The day after our breakup, I'd painted my living room the vibrant teal I'd always wanted but Ethan had dismissed as too intense. I'd restored my eclectic throw pillows, hung colorful artwork, and positioned family photos prominently on shelves. Every change, no matter how small, represented reclamation of my space and identity. My phone chimed with a text from Tara, who had reached out a week after the restaurant confrontation. Our coffee meeting had revealed her own growing discomfort with Marco's relationship with Ethan, particularly their Spanish exchanges that excluded others. While Marco wasn't nearly as demeaning as Ethan, he'd enabled the behavior through participation and silence. My stand had prompted Tara to have difficult conversations with Marco about respect and inclusion, ultimately strengthening their relationship. Book club tonight at 7. Don't forget to finish the novel, her message reminded me. Who would have imagined that from the ashes of my relationship would emerge new friendships? The book club had formed organically when Tara introduced me to several women in her circle, creating a monthly gathering centered around literature, wine, and increasingly deep conversations about relationships and self-worth. Professionally, the energy I'd previously directed toward accommodating Ethan now fueled career advancement. I'd successfully pitched a comprehensive rebranding strategy for our primary client, earning recognition from senior leadership and a promotion to marketing strategist with a substantial raise. The confidence I displayed in presentations now came naturally rather than requiring the mental pep talks that had preceded professional interactions during my relationship. My newly decorated office featured a small framed quote, "Never again will I silence myself to make others comfortable." It served as daily reminder of the lesson learned through painful experience. Walking home from the cafe, I passed the watch store where I'd purchased Ethan's anniversary gift, the one he never received. I'd returned it the week after our breakup, using the refund to book a solo weekend trip to Vancouver where I'd practice Spanish with tourists and locals alike. That small act of independence had sparked a passion for solo travel, with plans now forming for a 2-week exploration of Spain the following spring. Approaching my apartment building, I noticed a familiar figure waiting near the entrance. My stomach tightened momentarily before relaxation returned. This encounter was inevitable in a city where our social and professional circles occasionally overlapped. "Cassie," Ethan said, straightening as I approached. He looked essentially the same, handsome, well-dressed, confident, yet somehow diminished in my perception. "Hello, Ethan," I replied neutrally, stopping at a comfortable distance. "What brings you here?" "I was in the neighborhood for a property showing," he explained, though we both recognized the transparent excuse. "Thought we might talk." "I'm not sure we have anything to discuss," I said, not unkindly but firmly. "It's been 3 months." He shifted uncomfortably, clearly unaccustomed to my direct approach. The Cassie he'd known would have accommodated this unexpected visit, invited him up for coffee, listened to whatever explanation he'd crafted. "You look good," he offered, eyes taking in my casual confidence, the highlights I'd added to my hair, the relaxed posture that had replaced my former tension around him. "Thank you," I replied simply, without returning the compliment or diminishing my own worth with self-deprecation. "I've been thinking about what happened," he continued when I didn't fill the silence. "I wasn't at my best that night. The things I said in Spanish. I didn't mean them." "I think you did," I countered calmly. "And that's okay. They helped me recognize fundamental incompatibilities between us." Ethan frowned slightly, clearly expecting a different response, perhaps lingering anger he could label as emotional, or wounded vulnerability he could exploit to reestablish connection. "Everyone makes mistakes, Cassie. Relationships require forgiveness. They also require respect," I replied. "Something I've learned to prioritize, both from partners and myself." The subtle shift in his expression confirmed what I suspected. This encounter wasn't about genuine remorse, but about reestablishing control. The realization produced no anger, only clarity and a touch of compassion for someone who measured relationships in terms of power rather than partnership. "I should get going," I said, stepping around him toward the building entrance. "I wish you well, Ethan. Genuinely." He looked momentarily startled by my composure, perhaps realizing for the first time that I had moved beyond both his influence and the pain he'd caused. "That's it? After a year together?" I paused, considering his question seriously. Sometimes the most valuable thing we gain from relationships is the wisdom to recognize what we don't want. I'm grateful for that lesson. Without waiting for his response, I entered my building, the security door closing definitively behind me. The encounter left me feeling neither vindicated nor upset, but simply certain of my worth and the boundaries I would maintain to protect it. Later that evening, as our book club discussed the novel's themes of identity and resilience, I shared a sanitized version of my encounter with Ethan. The supportive responses from women who had become genuine friends reinforced the richness of connections built on mutual respect rather than power dynamics. I have a friend who might benefit from your experience, said Melissa, a pediatric nurse with a thoughtful demeanor. She's in a relationship where she's constantly walking on eggshells. Would you mind if I shared your story with her? Of course not, I replied. Sometimes hearing about someone else's journey helps illuminate our own path. This unexpected role as informal mentor to others navigating challenging relationships had emerged gradually. I didn't position myself as an expert, merely as someone willing to share hard-earned wisdom about recognizing subtle forms of disrespect before they escalate to obvious mistreatment. In my personal journal that night, I reflected on the 3-month transformation. The pain of betrayal had evolved into appreciation for the wake-up call it provided. The Spanish lessons intended to bridge distance between Ethan and me had instead connected me to a broader world and deeper self-understanding. The relationship that once seemed central to my identity now appeared as a necessary chapter in a much longer story of personal growth. El final de una cosa es el comienzo de otra, I wrote in increasingly confident Spanish. The end of one thing is the beginning of another. As I prepare to share this story, I wonder how many of you have experienced similar moments of clarity in relationships. Have you ever discovered something that completely changed your perspective about a partner? Did you stay or walk away, and what did you learn from that choice? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please consider hitting the like button and subscribing to my channel. Your support helps me continue sharing these personal journeys that remind us we're never alone in our experiences. Remember that sometimes the most painful revelations lead to the most profound growth. In my case, a betrayal in Spanish became the catalyst for reclaiming my authentic self in every language. Thank you for listening, and until next time, value yourself enough to expect respect from others.